Hey guys, we're live again. This is Intune.training, the Steve and Adam show. This is the place to learn how to use Microsoft Intune. I'm Adam Gross, one of your hosts from the other coast. Hey, look at that. Did some rhyming and it's awesome. Hey, so I'm a config manager admin in my day job and night job, and love doing this stuff, mostly focused on OSD. And we got Steve. He's been coaching me, teaching me on all sorts of Intune related things. And so this is our second installment of walking through how to do cool things with Intune. So Steve, hello.
Hey, how you going, Adam? Steve here. So I'm Steve Hosking. I'm MVP SCCM Intune and have been working in the industry for nearly 20 years. That seems so much shorter than that. And I spend a lot of my time nowadays doing and implementing Intune platforms and making the technology work. So my day job previously was managing devices and doing a full SCCM implementation, but now I spend most of my time doing Intune and everything associated around that. So I'm here chatting with Adam and helping him out and explaining how all the technology all works.
Yeah, I'm excited because I think we're starting to break down some of the barriers of the difference between Config Manager and Intune. And today's show, we're going to be focusing on Autopilot. And I think this is one of the sweetest features to come along to really kind of bring Intune to the forefront, to showcase its possibilities and to really help folks like me out. So I've done desktop admin most of my life. And so being able to have a different way to deliver an OS to a machine is quite impactful in our environment. And with the way that Windows 10 is built, with things like device reset, you can really start to see the pieces come together on how maybe this is the last task sequence you've ever had to build, is to get you to Windows 10, and now you can leverage the OS that comes built on the box from your OEM, and you can autopilot that right out of the box, and you never have to go in and do the things that we've been doing for years of dealing with OSD and building on images and capturing images and all of the fun stuff that we get to fill our day with. We get to maybe do some more value add for the company and leverage some really neat functionality. So I'm excited to see some of the cool tricks of the trade here that Steve's been working with. I've played around with it quite a bit, but I think Steve's got some really cool stuff to show us.
Yeah, definitely, Adam. And part of that whole conversation that I have with all of my customers around Autopilot and Intune and how that device management story plays through is, look, how long does it take for your computers today, Adam, to build? So you're doing a task sequence with OSD and SCCM. It's taking at least half an hour to 45 minutes for a really, really well designed and implemented task sequence, plus the hour on either side for IT to be involved to make sure that it's all set up properly or picking the computer up from a desk. What we can do with the Intune technology is start turning around and going, you know what, Mr. User, go in to the company portal and just hit the reset button and away you go, and it starts again. And it's that story that makes life a lot easier.
And I think that that's a story that I've really started to gravitate towards over the last several years. So in our Windows 7 environment, we always had a gold image where we did a reference image, and then we would patch that thing occasionally. And if you mess with Windows 7, there's like 8,000 updates if you ever rebuild that machine. And I remember the last time we patched it took days to get that thing patched. And the idea that we can take just the ISO media from volume licensing, and we can slap that on a machine, or even let the vendor slap that on a machine for us, and trust that as that's our gold image. That's our base image that we work from. That really takes a lot of the the overhead out of it. But the challenge, I think, from an IT admin perspective and from a desktop perspective is for years we've always wanted to tweak and customize and make the OS this like perfect environment for the user. And why?
Well,
For what?
we wanted to protect the user. We want to make it easy for them. And it's like, oh, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to remove, say, application X because, or holographic is a good example of a conversation I've had with customers where they're like, oh, yeah, we don't want Windows holographic in there because, well, we might get a support call on it. So, but you might get 1 or 2 support calls. What does that matter in the grand scheme of the 2 days it takes me to figure out how to turn that off?
Or if turning that off was going to break something in the future that Microsoft has planned.
Well, exactly, and that's the conversation, and it even gets down to the group policy conversation. So a lot of the conversation we're having with our customers is around, look, we need this group policy to set the font for our emails, or this our company styling is it's Arial 8 instead of Times New Roman 12, and it's like, well, what's the value prop of us actually doing that? So that's the starting point of why we're doing Intune and why Autopilot is such a powerful product. And you start having those why questions, because if I can save 2 hours per computer for my IT staff, where can I spend that time in place of it?
Like, yeah, exactly. And so, one of the the new philosophy I've got on this is that my corporate image is now just Windows. I just need Windows on the box. And then everything else is policies and configuration items that I can apply through either group policy or through Intune policies or through configuration manager CIs or any of those next layer things. But if you give me a machine with Windows on it, with Windows 10 on it, I can take it and manage it from there. I don't need to wipe that image out and start over. And I think that's a huge learning curve thing for people who've done this for years. We've always done wipe it out and then put new back, wipe it out and put new back.
Yep.
And so that we could do that one tweak that you can't do unless you have wiped it out and put it back. And but why? Why are we doing that? And I think that's a hard conversation that I've had lots of conversations with people about this and said, why are you doing this? And they'll fight tooth and nail. Oh, well, we've got certain SLAs and I need to be able to do this and that and things. Yep. Some of that is a management problem that you need to address and think about the new way that you could be doing this, and just it's a shift. It's a shift in your thinking.
Oh, definitely, and that's the big conversation point is, look, the number of admins that I've turned around and gone, oh, well, your users have to go through the out-of-box experience. Oh, no, I'm going to do that for them. It's like, but then it's registered for you, and it defeats the whole purpose. But this time through, what we're going to do is we'll do it for them. And so then it's like, cool, but what about next time?
Yeah.
They don't know how to do it. You did it for them last time. So you need to... Yeah. But here's the stark fact of it. If you're moving to the new world order being Intune, Autopilot, and AAD joined, well, at what point do you hand over the reins to your staff and go, have at it? My position is, as soon as you build the platform, you get them starting using it. Like, from a training point of view, the earlier you get them on there, the less time you're going to have to spend with them.
Yeah. I mean, we have tons of intelligent people in our companies that we trust to do all sorts of amazing things to run our business. And for some reason, we treat them like children when it comes to giving them a computer that, I mean, come on, kids these days, they're born with computers in their hands, just about. This next generation of folks that are coming in, they know nothing but computers. And if we keep treating them the same way we've treated people for the last 30 years, we're never going to advance we're never going to get out of this business of
Exactly.
having to hold their hands and feeling like we have to deliver this, perfect customer service to them. They don't need it any more than, we want to do it for them, really. But we've got to get out of that. And I think Intune and Autopilot's really kind of help us get there.
Yep. So what I'm going to do, Adam, is I'm going to just start setting up the tenant, and we'll talk through that. And then while we're waiting for processes to happen, we can have a more robust conversation. So this tenant, we're going to be touching off from our previous call, where we sat there and we stepped through the process of setting up a troll tenant and configuring it all to be able to have company branding, and we've got licenses associated via security groups. In the intervening periods, we've updated our licenses to M365 E5 licenses on trial while we're building up this environment. So the first step we're going to do is we're going to go to Azure Active Directory, and we're going to finish off the mobility component here for the MDM MAM function once it finishes loading up. It's just going to take a little bit longer. Takes a bit of time for the data to come all the way from America to Australia. It's a bit slow.
Maybe we should drive from my machine next time, Steve.
Maybe. So here, because this is a lab, we're just going to hit all in all. Most companies, this won't be an issue, even if you use it for all in all for everything, but it's just best practice. If you're doing a pilot, you do it as some and some.
Now, can you tell me what these two things are?
Yes, I was just, that's a very good segue.
I'm sorry, I jumped the gun. All right, we don't have a script here. We're going off the cuff.
It's all good. It's all good. So the MDM scope here, this is around the the mobile device management. This is the ability to register devices, enroll devices into Intune, be it a mobile phone, be it a laptop, be it an iPad. What the MAM policy here is, it's actually, MAM has been renamed. So previously it was the Microsoft Application Management Platform, but it's now called the Application Protection Policy. So do you have a guess what the three-letter acronym for that is?
App.
Yeah.
It's like a bad move.
Yeah. Oh, no. It wasn't well thought through.
So you have to configure app policies for maybe apps.
Yes. So we've now configured this, right? So this is the ability to enroll and utilize the MAM and MDM features. So we'll close out of that, and I'm just going to set it on this one as well, make sure it's set as well. There's a very long story and a very good reason why that's there, but I don't know the exact explicit reason. It's complicated, but there's two applications now, and you need to make sure you've turned it on for both of them. So we now have that enabled, which means that we can now enroll devices into Intune. So the next step that I normally go to when I'm setting up a tenant is I go to all services, and I actually go and unselect all these stars. While it's not mandatory and you don't have to do that, you'll see on the left-hand side, my list of objects are disappearing and becoming a lot smaller. What this means is it makes it so I can find what I'm looking for very quickly, because there's a lot of services in Azure, as you can see while I'm going through, and we don't care about all of them except for Intune at the moment. We will add more over time, but right now we're only caring about Intune and Azure Active Directory as a side effect of that.
Now, Steve, can you type in Intune back on the All Services page? I've noticed this on multiple occasions, and I think I know the answer now. But so we have Intune and we have Microsoft Intune, and I believe that where you just were when you were setting the MDM and MAM policies was on the Microsoft Intune side of things. That was that service, and that the other one that we're going to go to is going to be the device management side of Intune, where we actually go configure Intune. Is that correct?
Sort of. It's just published there twice so people can find it. Is the short answer. App protection is a throwback to when the MAN policies were separate to MDM, and then Intune for Education is for if you've got an education subscription. Certain components.
So the Intune and the Microsoft Intune service links go to the same place now. Okay.
Yes.
But not to be confused with the other Microsoft Intune location, Active Directory, and MDM.
Yes. So the big elephant in the room that we haven't mentioned here is this isn't the first version of Intune. The old version of Intune is called Intune Classic, and it runs on Silverlight. You need to be running Internet Explorer to be able to view that, and it has a good number of limitations, and it is not recommended that you use it or implement it anymore. The only time that you would is it's based around older OSs. So, Adam, do you know when the Microsoft Windows 10 started supporting MDM enrollment? Just out of interest. I know I've put you on the spot here.
Well, no, I have no. Let's say 1511.
No, it was 1609.
Wow.
Yeah, so any version of Windows 10 before 1609 wouldn't actually or can't actually enroll into the new version of Intune. So all of those versions, let's be very transparent here and very blunt, are no longer supported, and you should be already moved off them. But anybody that's running those older versions of Windows 10, you can't use this technology.
Jake, you're gonna watch this video, and when you see this, make a note. You should get all your 1511 devices upgraded.
Yes, get off 1511. So what you're seeing here, so I don't think I can re-click on that. The first time you try and configure anything in Intune, you need to set your MDM authority. By default, well, there's three options here. You have Intune, you have Config Manager, and you have none. The first two are really self-evident. The third one, I don't actually know why you would use that unless it's like for if you're using a third-party MDM platform that's not listed here, and wanting to use some of the features from Intune. So we're going to set our MDM authority to Intune, and we're going to hit choose.
Now, Steve, I know we're not talking about config manager co-management or anything at this point. However, which of those two options or the three options would you select if you were using co-management?
That's a really good question, and my understanding is you select Intune. So I will be completely honest, I haven't spent much time with co-management and cloud management gateways, just because the customers that I tend to target for SCCM don't have the requirement for that today.
Well, so the great thing is, if you are a config manager admin looking at Intune, you can still follow along with all of these things, and you can begin building out your Intune tenant exactly the same as if you were if you're going to use it as Intune standalone, or if you're going to integrate it with co-management, because the requirement for config manager is to move away from the config manager managed version of Intune to Intune standalone so that you can transition to co-management. So they're specifically separating you out, back out from the commingled bit and doing it a different way. So so we're on the right track if you want to eventually do co-management and config manager with this.
And there's probably
this series, but just saying it's near to my heart, and so I think it's worth mentioning.
And it's probably very important to mention as well is, look, you can have SCCM and Intune running at the same time, and where you would have your Intune as a pilot, you want to test and validate things, you can still keep using SCCM or Config Manager in your platform as your standard device management system without impacting each other, unless you put in co-management or cloud management gateway or some of the crazy stuff. So we're now at the device enrollment page. This is where we can set up the Apple, Android, or Windows enrollment. So today we're going to focus on Windows enrollment because that's near and dear to our heart. We love Windows and it does everything we need. This is where we go and set up our autopilot policies. And I know one of the first questions that I'm going to be asked around this is, well, how do we set up the Intune connector for Active Directory to do hybrid AD join? And
yes, Stephen, let's please, because I need all of my devices to be hybrid because I have a local on-premises infrastructure that I need to connect to. I'm sure that I have to have that.
And that's a very, very good question. But the sheer fact of the matter is, unless your device is doing that authentication to your network environment, there is no requirement to have your devices joined to your local Active Directory with hybrid AD. And adding that functionality in there just makes it so much more complicated. So obviously you've got 20 years of group policy sitting there that you're going, look, I've always had these settings. I've always had my font set to this, or I've always had my wallpaper set to that. So some of the settings come across, but others don't. And to be honest, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, I see this as a very cleansing experience where I get to turn around to a customer and go, your group policy, yeah, you know what? You don't need that anymore. Start again. Give your users a great experience. You don't know what your group policies are set to, right? Like, you go into some companies where they have 1,500 group policy objects set, and you're like, I don't know where to start here. Oh yeah, we decided to go through and get all the policies from NIST and make it so we're fully secure and compliant. And it's like, yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, the Intune connector for AD, like for hybrid AD join, I don't recommend it to any of my customers, is the simple answer, and I'm very hesitant to actually turn it on because it does add a lot of complexity to your environment. So if you're going to do hybrid Azure Active Directory join, you need to have line of sight to your domain controller. So you need to be on your internal network. It takes out the whole coffee shop scenario. It changes a lot of scenarios for you. But we can go into that.
You're saying whenever I want to ship a brand new computer that I order from a vendor and send it to a user at their home to let them do autopilot, because that's what autopilot's built for. But you're telling me that if I want to do hybrid, that I now have to bring that machine back on site and autopilot that machine while I'm on site in my facility.
To my knowledge, it is required. There are functionalities and improvements coming from the product group around how that works. I know that there was talk that there'll be maybe a VPN solution or a way of pulling that information in, but obviously there is the offline domain join functionality, but then you need to be able to get line of sight to your domain controller to complete that scenario.
So really, in doing this, we're taking this amazingly slick and streamlined new functionality, and we're really somewhat crippling it by putting this more antiquated hybrid join functionality back into the mix. Then is what you're saying. I mean, I said those words, but that's what you implied.
Yes, that is very much what I implied. So there are scenarios where it is important, but I don't see for most of my clients that it is a scenario that I would be recommending, because it adds a lot of complexity to the environment and it's not a way forward. So think of it where you're sitting there and saying, look, today we're moving to Windows 10, we're moving to Intune, we're doing all of the the approach of moving to the new platform. But then what we're going to do is we're still going to use Windows XP. It's like, well,
they did have a start menu.
And I know that it's not, you can't run XP here. I'm not saying that, guys. It's just, look, you're going to have to make the change at one point or another. And that's the direction Microsoft's going. More and more will be AAD join only. Don't do hybrid AD unless you really, really have to. So that's all I can't stress it enough. So we're going to step now into the deployment profile scenario here. This is where we configure what our autopilot profile looks like. So today we're going to just set up a very simple user-driven profile, which is the default, or it was the original profile that we had from Microsoft for Windows Autopilot. So we're going to call this intune.training demo. We are going to, this can be applied to autopilot. Yep, perfect. So what this means is when you hit yes on that, and you target this policy to a security group, and you drop the devices, so very explicit devices, into that security group, the policy will apply to them even if they've not had the autopilot hardware hash harvested from the device or registered into the platform. So what that means is once the device is registered into Intune, you can have it converted into autopilot. So it makes life a lot easier for people flipping the bit from their environment.
So this is basically autopilot for existing devices, is what that checkbox enables.
Yes. So autopilot for existing devices that have been enrolled via traditional methods, whether it be manual enrollment or, believe it or not, hybrid AD, where it then have Intune enrollment from Active Directory. Send out a reset command and that device will be back online. So we now have deployment profiles here. You'll see that there's two options. One is user-driven and the other is self-deploy. Self-deploy is pretty cool, but it's not the scenario we're going to talk about today. Then we're going to join to AAD, as we can select either hybrid or Azure Active Directory. Today it's, as we said, and always, Azure Hybrid. This is where we now step into what we can hide out of the out-of-box experience. So the UBI. The UBI is what you see when you build a new computer. When you buy a computer from Best Buy, when you buy it from, well, JB Hi-Fi in Australia, or whichever company that you're using, where it comes up and goes, "Hi, I'm Cortana, a little bit of Wi-Fi here," and all of that fun stuff. This is
like her.
Oh, I'm sure. I've had many experiences of hearing Cortana go through this process. So that whole process, which traditionally we've always worked very hard to hide, suppress, and ignore, is very important to see for all of our end users, because that's the process they go through every time they get a new computer now, and we now know that they can have that device registered to them. So I'll go through that a little bit more once we've got this whole process going through, and why it's important to have the device enrolled to the user. So this also hides the privacy settings, and it disallows them to change the account type and options associated to that. The important one here is to make sure it is standard, because we don't want our users to have admin access to all the devices, do we, Adam?
Well, I don't know. What if they need to install their printer or something when they get their machine built?
There's ways around that, but more often than not now, most drivers are being published by Microsoft through Windows Updates for Business. So if you've got a modern printer, yes. If you've still got a HP Jet Direct 4, well, I'm sure it's still running, but it's not going to really work out of the box for you. Although it probably will have inbox drivers by default, but hey, they haven't changed in 20 years.
So we're basically saying, you know what, we've got a user who's going to be potentially at their home, on the road, at a coffee shop, something, with their new device, and they're going to be connecting it to the internet to begin the autopilot process, and they're going to be all alone with no IT assistance, and we're going to stick them out there with no administrator account as a safety net. And so I'm playing the devil's advocate here, because we've been living in a low trust environment for a very, very long time, and virtually no one has admin rights, but we've put in controls to elevate. But the point being here, we should give standard a chance. We should do everything in our power to make standard work, because the moment you slide that slider over, you're introducing a very high level of risk into your environment that doesn't need to be there. And there are better options, and things have changed. Like Steve said, there just is really very little reason to need to rely on that crutch and say, oh, we've got to have this give the users administrator rights out of the gate.
Yeah. And this is a fun conversation that I have with a lot of my peers and customers, is we don't have local admin accounts. We don't create local user accounts. We don't have any account that is an admin on the device. And you say that to a lot of people, and they sit there and go, but what happens if I need to get data off that device that's encrypted with BitLocker and it can't sign onto the domain, or it can't sign onto the network? What do I do? And my response is, well, you know what? We've been holding the hand of of the customer for 20 years, saying, oh, don't worry if you don't save it in the right location. We'll go and find it for you. Now we're at a point of going, look, we have OneDrive for Business. We have OneDrive for Business, no and folder redirection. So if you save it on your start menu, if you save it in documents, if you save it in pictures, we'll roam it for you, not a problem. So now that we know that people are saving their files in documents, desktops, and pictures, what does it matter? What does it matter if the device is bricked? Because it should be up in the cloud. And if it's not, and it's an executive walking over, well, I save it in the root of C. Well, it's like, mate,
hey,
your risk
your
risk and compliance conversation doesn't actually hold water anymore. Let's go and have a chat to the risk officer of you saving into the wrong location. And that's a confronting conversation to have with an executive, but it's these are the sorts of conversations that we need to start having and saying, look, it's too bad, so sad.
Yeah, and I think that's really great, because we've I've been using this phrase over and over and over again. It seems more frequently now, as these are administrative problems, not technical problems. And there's a point where you need to hold users accountable for what they're doing. You need to put technology in place and trust the technology and say, okay, you should be using this. We moved to folder redirection 10 years ago, and our users just know we're not going to bend over backwards to try to recover a machine. If it craters, here's your new machine, and all your data will come down when you log in.
That's
Have
right.
a nice day. And yeah, so what?
Yep.
You've got BitLocker on the machine. Throw it in the trash and move on if it's broken. Like, what are we worried about? Stop spending this time. Stop wasting your time trying to be the hero for the user. Just trust the technology and move on.
Yep, definitely. And here's the fun conversation that I started with you at MMS was around, oh, look, we're sitting there with BitLocker. We've got BitLocker on all our devices. The keys are sent up into Azure Active Directory. Does that not mean that we now have a security hole because we have the keys for drive encryption stored off the device? And people look at me and go, but, well, we need to be able to get data off there. And it's like, but do we? I know I don't go and get the recovery keys anymore. I don't care. Oh, the device is, your device is not able to be signed into. Okay, let me go and run down with the Windows 10 image stick and we're going to reinstall it and you'll be back online in half an hour to 45 minutes. And you have that conversation and people go, oh, okay, cool. And we're not going to worry about the BitLocker. So this is where I started looking at it and going, well, do we actually need to keep the BitLocker key? Set it and forget it. It's a bigger conversation, obviously, but it's one of these things that you sit there and go, well, do we need it?
Yeah, and that's where you definitely get into those rabbit holes of, well, what if, some external force was applied that now has created that machine inadvertently, and we're trying to just get that user back online. They just docked their machine at their desk this morning and now they're BitLockered for no apparent reason. And we can, it's a convenience to have it, but is it the end of the day? No, it's really not. It really does turn into it's for the user to have a better experience, and we don't have to spend an hour, they don't have to waste an hour with their machine being imaged. Okay, I get it.
Yep.
But we have a user self-service portal for that. They can just go and type their stuff in and get it themselves. They don't even have to involve IT. And if that works, great. But to your point, yeah, for the most part, you could probably just not care about the keys too.
Yep. And everything's in SharePoint or OneDrive, so they can work off their iPad, their phone, somebody else's computer. So,
and so then let's take it that one next step further of, okay, so this is even more the reason why Autopilot is useful, because we don't have to wait for the 30 minutes for the OS to apply to that machine to give the user a new machine. You just pull out a new machine, give it to them, and if you've already got the OS sitting there, waiting at Ubi for the user, they can autopilot in and be working within minutes, at least have data on the machine within minutes. Now it's going to take a few minutes for the rest of their apps to get there. Did they need all those apps today? Probably not.
Nope.
And you can get your email online and so there's definitely, if you really stop and re-architect your environment, you can really rationalize away a lot of this stuff that we've been doing for years.
That's right. And that's exactly it. So let's not get bogged down on this again, and we'll continue. As you can tell, we're very passionate about this technology.
You keep clicking, I'll keep talking, and we'll just keep moving.
So what we have here is the white glove experience. We're not going to talk about that, but this is a very new technology from Microsoft. It came out last month before, and it's going to be cool, but for what we're using it for is not this scenario. We're just doing a straight up user-driven configuration. And then obviously we're not going to set a device name, because these are cattle, they're not pets. We don't name our cattle. Well, actually you do. I grew up on a dairy farm and you do name your cattle. But anyway, that's completely beside the point. At the end of the day, we're sitting here and saying, look, why do you need to know what the name of the computer is? It's irrelevant, it's disposable. Go and grab another one and away you go. So no more host file, no more DNS entries for your admins going, oh yeah, what I'll do is I'll put a CNAME that forwards from Bob that forwards to my computer name, so then I can just go straight / Bob. Oh yeah, that was easy. Oh yeah, there's been a couple of fun ones like that across the career. So we've just hit next, and now we're going to the scope tags. Scope tags give us the ability to sit there and say, this scope of users have access, or this scope of users are going to be targeted. Again, we're not going to do anything here with that. We're not, can we create a new group here? No. So right now, we're not going to do any assignment because we can't create a security group here to do that assignment. You'll note that you can't do direct device or direct user assignments in Intune, and this is intentional. We want to make sure that you are always deploying to a group, because then it's easy to manage and maintain. So I'm just going to hit next on that, and then we have the review and create tab. The cool thing about this UI and why and around all of this is, if we were to have done this even 3 weeks ago, the UI was completely different, because Microsoft's just released this UI. So there's our training demo configuration, and we have all of that information there. So the next step that we've traditionally, or that if you go and follow most people, they go, all right, now what you need to do is fire up your VM and then hit Shift F10 or boot into the OS and install dash script get dash Windows Autopilot info, right? Well, there's actually a neat little trick that you can get around needing to do that. And what we need to do is we need to install the module, which will be already on my computer. So I'm just going to import here. And we're just going to hit F8. The next step is we need to connect to Autopilot Intune. And it'll prompt me for a username, which is going to be this one, intune.training. And I'll pop a window if it's not already authenticated.
Now, Stephen, I noticed that you're running this script on your computer and not on our new machine that needs to be autopiloted.
That's correct. So what we're doing here is we're actually going to download a JSON file. So as you can see, this is the first time I've actually signed into Intune PowerShell on this device. And while we've got this here, let's have a little quick chat about this. So this is actually an app ID sitting in Azure Active Directory. So you register an app and it gives you the ability to access certain components of the graph, which underlies all of Microsoft 365, Intune, Azure Active Directory. And these are the options that have been granted to this application. And we as admins can consent on behalf of them. So to go back to your question about, right, what are you actually doing here, Steve, is we're going off and we're grabbing that configuration profile that we just created. So if I go $app policies, you can see here's the display name of intune.training demo, right? And we then go out-of-box experiences, and there's the configuration. So we're hiding it. We're hiding privacy. We're hiding EULA. It's a standard user type. It's a single user device. We're skipping the keyboard, and we're hiding the escape link. So
this is basically kind of a light version of an unattended XML that we would traditionally be used to, right?
Definitely, 100%. So my mouse has just gone flat.
Oh, nice. Is it one of those cool collapsible Surface mice?
No, oh well, I've got one of those, but my batteries are on their last legs. So I'm just going to add that into this object here. And we're then creating this JSON file here, which I believe, okay, let me just set client path to somewhere that I know it needs to be. /dev/Intune training and enter. And then we'll just go F8. And so here's that JSON file there. So what we'll quickly do, because we're in VS Code, we can just open that up and we can see it as a JSON file in here. And this is what we then publish into our configuration. It's a little bit different than what we have here because this is all that we actually need and Microsoft doing that conversion for us. So now if I go to Windows Explorer and F drive, just give me a second.
Now, Steve, we didn't publish this to a particular security group a minute ago. And the thing I think is the reason here is that number one, all you have to have is the file. But number two, this device that we're going to autopilot is not currently provisioned or registered in any way in our new Intune tenant. And so traditionally, you would have to get that device, the bits from that device registered into Intune. You can still do that today. That is one of the mechanisms to do it. But we'd need to boot the machine up to the UBI, launch PowerShell, do some things, or we'd have to get our vendor to send that information to our Intune environment, to register that device. So we'd have to have the device in Intune, then assign that policy to that device for it to be able to be autopiloted by the user from the Ubi wizard. And so what we're doing here is we're skipping some of that pre-registration, and we're saying, look, we know all the registration information. We don't need to know about the device yet. Here, just this will give you all the bits you need to register to our tenant. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's correct. So what we're doing here is this JSON file is partially what is downloaded when we go through that autopilot onboarding process and pulling data from the cloud. So where that works is we go in here and we drop that into a directory in the VHDX. So this VHDX, all that we've done with this is we've created that VHDX from convert ISO to VHDX script. And we then go in and we have an autopilot folder here, and we just paste that file in. If I remember to actually, just give me a second, we reveal an Explorer and we copy that and we paste that into the autopilot directory. It needs to be called autopilot configuration file.json. If it's not autopilot configuration file.json, it doesn't work. So we've now saved that in there, and we just need to eject that disk.
And it's worth pointing out that what he's doing here is this is to boot in off of a Hyper-V box, and this is a great way to do testing on autopilot. Like you said, he took just the Windows ISO media, and there's a PowerShell module out there that converts the ISO to VHDX, and so then he doesn't even have a built machine yet. He just took Windows and converted it into a disk, and now he's going to boot it up the first time, and it's just going to be there. If you were doing this traditionally on a physical box, you would need to drop the file on there via some other mechanism. You could PXE boot or boot off of a thumb drive or something like that to drop this file on there. So
definitely, you could even use SCCM to do it. So you can even use a task sequence, which is a fully supported methodology to convert your Windows 7 devices across to Windows 10, where you lay down your Windows 10 image and you inject the JSON file itself.
Yep. So there's definitely multiple ways to get to this point to be able to test out the process. And so then once you get to your steady state, as you're buying new devices from your OEMs, you would have them pushing that information into your Intune tenant. But if the phrase is autopilot for existing devices, there's even a task sequence template in Config Manager that has all of these steps, including the JSON bit, already built out for you. And so it's all you need to do is get Windows on the box and get this JSON file on the box, and you're rolling. So, but for the most part, this is for testing and for existing devices that haven't been previously enrolled in Intune. If you've got them enrolled already, you could skip this part and you could just boot the machine right into a new Windows 10 Ubi experience.
Exactly. And that's the great thing about this technology, is that it's actually really flexible. The only thing, and this is the important thing to call out based on the Twitter conversations that we've had recently, is look, if you're going to be doing anything other than user-driven, you need to have a physical TPM.
Yes, and a TPM 2.0.
Yes. So we're just waiting for this to pop up now. So this is where we can have a little bit of a conversation around everything else that's going on in the tenant. So while that's doing that, I'm just going to sit this down here, and I'm going to go back to my browser. I'm just going to grab that off to the side. So we can sit there and watch that go through while we have a little bit of a playthrough in here. What we have in here, what we should also look at setting up, is the CNAME validation. So this is to validate that we've set it up correctly. My guess is that we haven't set this up correctly because we haven't actually gone and made any changes to our DNS for it. So Adam and I will work on getting this sorted out after the fact, but that will go through and clean that up. The other important one to note here is the enrollment status page. So have you heard much about the enrollment status page before, Adam?
Yes.
What the enrollment status...
Pretty amazing because it used to not exist, and they've just continually made some improvements to it, and I think it's fantastic.
Yep. So the enrollment status page gives us the ability to sit there and see the installation process of applications when they're being installed and deployed via the Autopilot while a computer is being provisioned. So here's where we then go and say, well, do we want to see the workflow and see things being installed? The answer is yes. We want to empower our staff. We want them to know that we're doing stuff rather than them signing in and going, oh, I've got my computer. I don't have any apps. Where are my apps? Oh, well, they'll come through eventually. You'll get there. Just wait. This gives us the ability to sit there and go, well, this is going to pop up and say, here you go.
I think that's a great thing that we've, I think as admins, we've fought and fought and fought for things like this for quite a while because with so many of the processes that we've seen with moving, doing our upgrades from 7 to 10 and things like that, we've really been encountering that, well, it's just sitting there with this spinning thing and it's not giving me any words. Yep. And that spinning thing's been sitting there for 30 minutes and how long is, it doesn't tell me anything. And so providing some sort of useful information to the user lets them know that something is happening is hugely powerful for them. And I think this is a great add.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. So the first iteration of Autopilot and Intune, when we were doing 1709 rollouts, didn't have this functionality, and we'll get into the point where we're like, look, we need to be able to tell the user just hold on, just wait. We're installing stuff, and we had the conversation internally of going, well, is it worth us sitting there and fixing all of this up and writing our own solution? And that's pretty crazy. And thankfully, Microsoft turned around and went, actually, here, look, this is what we're working on. It's going to be here shortly. So what we're looking at here on the VM on the right-hand side is I'm just going to select my region, being Australia. Yes, I'm not American, and it's not the default. So we're going to select Australia as our region. And then the next step is it will ask us what keyboard do we want. And this is important. We want the US keyboard. We don't want the UK keyboard because we want not to do stuff. Well, we want the keyboards to be correct for us. The other option is you can select this a second keyboard that we just skipped there. So one of the things that I find entertaining is if you select the US International keyboard. I don't know if you've selected that previously, Adam, but one of the cute things that happens when you select the US International keyboard is when you hit quotation marks or double quotes, it doesn't type it straight away until you type another character.
Oh.
So yes, and if you do, and typically it's waiting for second quotations again, like the double quotes again, and you end up with a whole heap of skewy code, and you're just like, what's just happened there? And it's because the English International keyboard's been selected, not the US keyboard.
Now, I believe I've heard that some additional UBI-related improvements may be coming down the pipe where we could potentially even take away even more of those, maybe less of these stops on asking for the keyboard, asking for this or that, for environments where, we already know the answers to some of these things. Why do we need to ask? And so, I mean, I've heard maybe And it just really comes
Yep.
down to, preference in your environment and for what your users do and don't need.
Yes, and a lot of that is around the self provisioning scenario that we were looking at earlier. So we didn't select the self deploy.
Right.
One of the best features that Microsoft brought in with Windows 10 1903 Media for Pro and Enterprise is the fact that you no longer have Cortana turned on by default.
Yay.
It sounds like such a little thing, but when you have 15, 20 devices in an office all going through the out-of-box experience at the same time, and Cortana starting up in a chorus across the room is quite an interesting experience.
Indeed.
So what I'm going to quickly do is on the ESP page over here on the left is I'm just going to leave this turned on so we can see some information pop up. So I'm just going to hit save on that. And that's deployed by default, and this is important. By default, that is deployed to all users. So you'll see that here. If we close that, and that's always going to be there. The default one will always be there, but you can create multiple profiles for multiple different groups, and they come down in priority order. So I'm just going to sign into the VM now, Intune.training. Oh. And we go next. And it'll ask me for my super secret password. And here's one of the cool things that I found with my corporate account is because we have passwordless sign-on set up with our phone, I actually don't get prompted for a password through here. It just pops up a number going, select number 12 on your phone, and it will allow you to sign in. So it just signs in without any passwords required. I think that's pretty powerful and pretty awesome. So one of the things I'm just going to quickly check while that's going through the process here from a security point of view is making sure that we have MFA required for device enrollment. And MFA for device enrollment, you sit here and it's a question of why would I want that? And it's a security thing. So if a hacker gets one of your user accounts and they figure out your username and password, they then can go and create a VM like I've just done here and have that on your corporate environment with all of your corporate applications, with everything associated around that. So previously by default, it was turned on that you needed MFA to join devices. But now it's turned off by default, so I highly recommend going and turning this feature on because more and more you're going to be building devices outside of your corporate boundaries, so you're not going to have the control. So I'm just going to quickly save that on the tenant. While we're in here, I'm going to show something that is near and dear to my heart called enterprise state roaming. Have you heard much about enterprise state roaming before, Adam?
Well, I tell you what, Stephen, I think it would be wonderful if you could make this work in my production environment because we have this turned on and we keep clicking all the boxes and everything looks right, but it just doesn't seem to be working. And we think that it's the answer to USMT and UEV,
Yes.
replacing both of those. And we have drank the Kool-Aid, but it doesn't seem to be working.
So I'll definitely replace UEV because this is the new version of UEV. Where while USMT, it's not quite. But what we're doing with enterprise state roaming is the settings like your dark theme, your look and feel of the operating system, basically what you see with Windows as a consumer when you go from computer to computer is the same as what we're turning on here. By default, it's off because not everybody wants it. But for the easiest way of migrating data from one computer to another is just turn it on because it makes your life so much easier. Obviously, you can sit there and say, look, I'm going to do selected users, but we want everybody to have that because it's a free kick. Once we then flick in OneDrive known folder redirection, and it gives you the ability to auto redirect and roam your desktop documents and pictures, as well as what you get with enterprise state roaming around favorites, web settings, and everything around that. It's a really good replacement for roaming problems.
Yeah, and I want to say, I think that we must be experiencing something along with the DRM realm. We think we've got some sort of DRM document rights management stuff configured that's preventing that from syncing properly or something. We've been fighting that for a bit, but yeah, I mean, I think it's, and really to the point of, well, it's not really a USMT replacement, but if for our environment, we've basically got USMT down to where we don't really migrate hardly any. We get your printers and your network mappings, and that's about it. And so, yeah, if we can switch this on and teach users how to map a new printer, man, we're good.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's where what we can do now, and this is how we manage our printers, is we actually have a scheduled task that we use as a logon script that installs printers and installs drive maps and everything from the legacy world. It's not pretty, but it does the job of what we need today. Ideally, and this is the idyllic world, is everything gets moved to SharePoint. Everything gets moved to Teams and document libraries there.
And print to PDF. I mean, who needs paper?
Well, yeah. Like in our office, I work in a managed service provider. What we do is we sit here and we are doing constant tech work. And we've got 3-4 printers in the organization, and they're like, Steve, we want these automatically mapped. I'm like, why? We're all IT professionals. We should be able to go to settings and go add printer. And the best thing about Windows 10 is it has the ability to go, oh, yeah, these printers are on your network. Which one do you want to use? And
it even knows which one you probably use the most and sets it as your default.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's the power of how all of that works now. Yeah, I really like that technology. So you'll now see we have a device that's come in, which is this VM here. And my mouse keeps turning off. Just bear with me. And we go to all devices and we select that device. So you'll see here it's using the desktop name. And part of the conversation we were saying earlier about why do we want our users to run through this process is this feature right here, the enrolled user. I can now click on that user and I can find information out about that device, or that user, I should say. But the more important one is, right, so Adam, when your staff ring up, they don't ring up and go, look, I have a problem with computer 123, right? They go, hi, I'm Adam. I have a problem with this computer. I have a problem with my computer. I don't know what my computer name is. And how do we find out who they are? So this is where I can...
everybody's computer has their full name and home address as the name so that we can make sure that we can find them. I mean,
well, of course, that's
know what their device is.
That's how the media has told us that we can find each other. Is all we need is the IP address, and we can tell you which desk you're at.
Yeah, well, I mean, why not just name the computer the IP address just to make sure? Right.
Well, exactly. That would be entertaining.
I still don't understand why there's only a 15-character limit on the device name. I just don't get it.
It goes back to legacy. It's back when we had 8.3 names.
Turns out you can actually use more than 15 characters for a device name.
Yes, but please don't.
It really causes problems.
Yes, and why do you need to name your computers? Let Windows handle it for you. You don't need to. So what I was going to quickly show you here is, look, I can now go in here with my user object and go, look, what devices are there registered for Stephen? And I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. And we select that device, and I can click into it and I can see all the information about that device. One of the things you need to do here is if you're wanting to manage it, if you're wanting to manage it, which is go into Intune, by default it doesn't auto filter. So you need to just type in the computer name and search. In my case, I only have one computer, but if you've got a lot of computers in there, make sure you take a copy of the computer name. Microsoft's aware of it. They're trying to fix it. It's just taking a bit of time. But you can see that this is the device that we're working on now. We can go and find out more information about the hardware manufacturer and everything around that. The operating system language, so you'll see that we're using ENGB. The reason why we do that is with Australia, if we use ENUS, we get prompted for a language pack with UAC when we're installing it.
And you have to file an annual tax return with the US.
Well, yes. And this gives us GDPR as well.
Oh, there you go.
It doesn't, but hey, I thought I'd take the joke. So you'll now see that this VM's finished build. And that's it. That is Autopilot. And that's how easy it is to set up. We can go through and look in our default policies. So you'll see here, by default, this device is not compliant because we don't have any compliance policies assigned to it. It's a good thing. Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. So we'll go back over here. So now we have Windows Hello for Business set up. How many people want to set up Windows Hello for Business? You go and have that conversation with your execs and they're like, oh, we can do fingerprint sign in, or I can use my fancy camera on my computer to sign in, right? You've had these conversations, right, Adam?
Oh, yeah. Numerous times.
And what we find happening there is they start having that conversation and they go, but all right, cool. We're going to turn on Windows Hello for Business. What do we need to do that? And I'm just going to quickly put this onto another screen to put my mobile phone number in.
Only 2 people are going to watch this video, and it's just going to be me, at least as one of those people.
I know. I understand that.
Yeah, live a little.
But yeah, Windows Hello for Business, as soon as you turn that on in a corporate environment, what you're going to have happen is it now uses OAuth 2 instead of the traditional NTLM auth that it's expecting to use, or Kerberos auth. So when we move across to going to existing file shares, it starts having issues authenticating, and your users will be prompted to authenticate every time. There is methodology on updating your Active Directory to support this, but it takes time to set it up. So if you're deploying Intune and you're having issues with authentication and everything around that onto existing file shares, that's why. Turn off Windows Hello for Business and it'll fix your problems up straight away. So I'm just finishing off setting this up. And finished. And you'll see now we're going through past the security prompts. So I don't know what else you'd like me to go through today, Adam, but I'm pretty comfortable with where we're up to here.
Well, I think that the what I'd like to see next, and we've been going for a while at this point. So I think in our next stage, I think we should talk about how do we get our apps on this machine? How do we get our policies on this machine? How do we make it look like what we do today, but in a more modern way? I mean, in light of all of the things that we've discussed about, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. Well,
Yeah.
okay, some of the stuff we do need to do. So, help walk through all the next phases of those things, to show us how, okay, we've got this autopiloted machine. Is it really the same as our other machine? Can I tell the difference? How do I use it? So
Yep.
I think we've still got a little ways to go to peel back some more layers here, but I think this is, look, we're rocking and rolling. We've got a device that's ready to go on our, to access corporate resources and do what we need to do.
Definitely.
And I really like the JSON file trick. I think that's very nice in a state where we don't already have the device registered, because I know in previous iterations where I was testing this, you'd wait an hour just to get a device registered up the first time, and that doesn't demo very well. So
no, it doesn't. And that's part of what we're doing for, like, we do a lot of these provisionings and a lot of these configurations for our customers, and how that's working for us is we're sitting here and saying, look, we have our own laptops, we have our own labs. We're going to run a PowerShell script that goes and gets that JSON file and injects that into the VHDXs for us. So we can sit there and constantly spin up new VMs for our customers and do that testing and validation without having to have physical devices, except for if we need the TPM 2.0.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, because you have access to that scenario is really amazing. So, in my environment, I only manage mine. I only manage our tenant. But if you manage multiple tenants, or if you are working with a partner who's going to manage your tenant for you, all they need is access to your Intune environment, and they can basically white glove your whole OSD process from their office. Just, here, look, we're going to spin up some VMs on our side. Yep. All right. Everything looks good. Now, all you have to do is just deploy on your end. There's nothing to migrate. There's nothing to move. There's no, if you try to do this in a more traditional way, where this, hey, build me a task sequence in config manager and then migrate it over, or go build it in MDT and move it over, and try to help. They couldn't even. They'd have to have a replica of your domain on their end and all these sorts of things to mimic it. And in this,
then you get it worked in my domain scenarios and it worked in my environment. It's like, well, yeah, of course it did. You've been able to sit there and do everything around that. And like, the one thing that I find just amazing is, so my lead engineer, Ben, he sits down in Melbourne. He works from home. He doesn't go on customer sites unless he has to. And we'll do full deployments where he doesn't actually go on the customer site other than the kickoff meeting. And that's it. All the rest is done remotely. We sit there, we have that conversation, and then it's all ran via Teams. We have VMs, and we spin up everything we need.
Yeah, that's just revolutionary. Yep. The speed at which you can get a company moving with this is amazing. And if you've listened to any of the marketing coming from Brad Anderson and those guys, the word that he keeps saying is, if you're starting greenfield, if you're starting with a brand new instance, don't start with traditional on-prem Active Directory. Right. Don't start buying hardware. Don't spin up physical infrastructure. Start here. It can do everything you need. The challenge that we're faced with is the migration path from traditional legacy. We've got 30 years of history in all of this stuff that's sitting here, and pulling all those pieces apart and hoping all the house of cards doesn't collapse on us as we make the migration. That's the thing that's crippling. That's really difficult to wrap our heads around from an organizational perspective. Is got all of these things, and which thing is going to be the one that makes it all fall apart on us. That's the thing that keeps us awake at night. But things like this is a thing that you can incrementally add to your environment. You can you can just add this to your arsenal of things and start making the transition. Prove it out. Say, okay, let me just use a device on the internet from my desk at my office. See what doesn't work. Prove it. Prove that it doesn't work instead of the other way, saying, oh, surely this is never going to work. No, prove it.
Well, the bigger conversation is, and this is what we're finding having happened at a couple of our customers, and the use case scenarios and the case studies from Microsoft, where they're sitting there and going, well, why do you need to have a dedicated corporate network plugged into all of your sites? I can get a fast internet connection from vendor X for twice as fast if I don't have the corporate component attached to it. And you
I need to put all my web proxy things in place and protect me from the internet.
That's right. And that's exactly it. It's a matter of taking the time and going, well, if I sit there and have all of my devices running on VPN at my customer sites, is my infrastructure capable of handling that for client to server VPN? And if it is, what does it matter? We've got always on VPN. It's no different than direct access. Or, yeah, so food for thought.
Yep. Well, I don't know about you, but I think it's probably just past your lunchtime, and well, it's just way past my bedtime here. So
yep.
I think we should call it quits and plan for another round of this sometime in the future, very soon, and tackle some more bits of Intune. I found this to be very educational. I mean, I kind of playing dumb for some of it for the dramatic effect, but I think this stuff is really amazing, and I think you're gonna really see this playing a big role in the future of your organization, and you can't just keep ignoring it. This is the future. This is where it's going, and do everything you can to begin testing it. And I mean, as you can see, we got 3 months to mess around with this and just to pilot it out and try it. And you can do this on your own with very little infrastructure. I mean, you need a web browser and a single VM, and you can be testing Autopilot all day long. Or even you don't even have to have a physical VM. You could build it in Azure if you wanted to pay if you had some Azure credits, or pay a little bit a month to do it.
Or if you've got an old laptop or an old desktop just sitting under the table.
I showed Steve earlier. I now have an imaging closet in my office here. I've got 6 old laptops sitting on the shelf that I'm testing with. So it doesn't take much. And
I have a pile of laptops just sitting here that I use for testing different scenarios, and you move them from tenant to tenant and away you go. So there's no reason why you can't start testing Intune today, is what I would be saying.
Absolutely.
Yep. And on that note, I think we will call it a wrap there, Adam. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Steve.
Sure we'll talk soon.
All right. See ya.